What can we expect in terms of changes that this will sort of bring?
Well, I don't know. But as somebody who's covered public companies for quite a while now, a couple decades, this makes me uncomfortable. I wonder what you think, because you covered media companies for a long time, too. This is still a controlled company. Page and Brin still have absolute control over what happens at this company, yet they've decided they don't have the time to actually run it. I don't know that we've seen this before in kind of modern tech history. Bill Gates was still chairman of Microsoft until just over 5 years ago, even though he had stepped back from operational roles.
Right.
If you look at Oracle, Larry Ellison doesn't have that kind of control. He's got a big share in the company. Jeff Bezos, I think, also doesn't have that kind of control.
Right, he has negative control to a certain extent, although not even anymore with the divorce settlement too.
Right.
Yeah.
So these founder CEOs, these titans that we thought of, Steve Jobs, similar. He sold out a lot of his initial Apple stake when he left the company in the 80s, bought Pixar, did all that. So he had a lot of influence, but he didn't have this kind of absolute control. We got these two guys with absolute control, but no direct accountability. They put Sundar Pichai up there now. He's been in charge of Google. Now he's in charge of Alphabet, too, which I'm not sure gives him that much. I mean, these are like money-losing moonshot bets that he now has to manage as well. And when somebody gets subpoenaed, somebody's got to answer for what happens at this company, whether it's cultural or it's regulatory.
You think they're setting him up, John. That's what it's,
Well, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Look at when Bill Gates stepped down as CEO of Microsoft. It was like the absolute peak of the market in January 2000. So that, I think, investors should be concerned about, too. But I don't understand. If you don't want to run this company, you don't want to be chairman, why should you have control?
But wait, if they have that much of a stake in the company, then doesn't it say that they have all this confidence in Sundar? I mean, could you read it that way, that they trust him with their baby?
Then why doesn't he have control?
Well, maybe he's too busy. I mean, there's an article in The Verge where they're talking about whether Larry Page has become Dr. Manhattan. He's too big for this world anymore, and he's moved on to, big thinking projects.
And that could well be, but he still has control of this public company, is my point. And if you're an investor, I think that raises questions about governance, about the culture of the company, which is called into question. If you look at Google, just in, say, Me Too issues, at the number of people, executives at Google, who have had issues with either dating employees or dating contractors. I mean, if you want to look at Eric Schmidt, Sergey Brin, David Drummond, Andy Rubin. Larry Page was not accused of any of that, stand-up, ethical guy, but he let all that happen on his watch. So now he's still in control. There are cultural changes that need to happen, but he's not the guy that
here's the first we see of it, John, but Zuckerberg one day may choose to step down as CEO, for example, but his control of Facebook will go on in perpetuity.
And I think there are big questions about what happens in those situations.
Well, not all co-founders have to sell in order to not run day-to-day operations, right? That's what you're suggesting.
Right. And I think right now, because controlled companies are under scrutiny, you look at what's happened with Pinterest, their provisions are such that, hey, if you're not in an operating role after a certain period of time, you lose that stock and that ability to control the company. Maybe it'll be fine. This is a company that did tremendously well over Larry Page's tenure.
Well, actually, I think there's investors who are encouraged by it, John, in part because they think it perhaps will mean more modest aspirations for the money-losing moonshot, so to speak, and that Sundar will take that under more control, and therefore you won't be spending quite as much on drones or Waymo or Loon or whatever it may be. And that you sort of will have things running a bit more smoothly in some ways. By the way, also, it should be noted, the Walmart family, it's not all, they can more or less still control Walmart and have for a long time, and have gave up, management control quite some time ago. So it's not completely unknown.
Right, not completely unknown, but in tech. Certainly in this era, and there were media companies that were controlled for a long time, and the founders didn't necessarily have a direct operating role, but often they did. Tech is fast moving, and it's under such regulatory pressure. I think this raises questions for investors about accountability-wise, what happens from here.
So you really seem to think these guys are trying to disappear themselves so they don't have to show up in front of Congress or deal with the heat if and when it comes.
Well, I mean, Larry Page had already sort of disappeared. I mean, he has vocal cord issues
Yes.
that caused him not to be one of the front and center speaking people. But Sergey Brin hasn't been out there much at all since Google Glass sort of blew up. So it's not as if they had to do this in order to retreat, but they're so young. I mean, these guys are 46 years old. They could easily, Lord willing, live another 40 years, not in an operating role necessarily, unless they decide to step back in, which they can at any time if they take the vote. And yet investors need to really trust them to make the right calls about a company that apparently they don't want to pay that close attention to.
Interesting.
They are on the board. They're going to stay on the board.
They're on the board.
And Sundar's their pick, right?
Yeah.
So there is that.
And, I mean, as far as I know, they're still on the 3-person executive committee, which includes them and Sundar.